Hey, this is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to the one and only Word on the Street podcast.
This is Bob the Beast Snap, and you're listening to Ramsey on Word on the Street. I'm on the street, baby! Word.
Word.
Welcome to the Word on the Street podcast. It is June 18th or 19th, depending on where you are in the United States or in the world. The year is always, of course, the year 2000 and Chael. On the Word on the Street podcast, we have with us our co-host, Jake from the MMA podcast. How you doing, Jake?
Good. Just follow us on the MMA podcast on Twitter. Pretty simple. Thanks for listening, guys.
As always, we have our other esteemed co-host, the legendary, the living legend, actually, Coach Jamie Huey from Team Sonnen and from the Ultimate Fighter. How you doing, Jamie?
I'm doing outstanding, guys. How are we?
Pretty good. You know, anybody watching the NBA basketball game? I feel sorry for you because you're missing out on something good here. We have a great guest today. Our guest tonight is, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Actually, I should have asked you before we went live. Jennifer Bonjean or Bonjean?
Bonjean, you got it right. Keep it anglicized. No need to French it up.
Keep it simple.
Nice. Jennifer Bonjean is our guest tonight. She is a criminal defense lawyer and member of the New York, New Jersey, and Illinois bar associations. You've seen her on Fox News, CNN, and Court TV giving legal commentary and analysis. And she is currently, somehow she's ended up working in the strange world of MMA legalities and I believe management, if I'm not mistaken. Jennifer, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on this. I'm going to have a lot of fun today, I can tell.
Yeah, we definitely will. Anything goes on this podcast, and we're hoping we can get some real talk here. Like I said, this isn't cable news. We don't have any commercial breaks. We just want to actually talk to you're a lawyer. First on the podcast, so we definitely have questions. Some of them may even be a little ridiculous, so please just humor us. But we are going to discuss. Yeah, we are just going to discuss some serious topics. I'll try that. Usually, we just we interview fighters and ask some ridiculous questions. But it's good to have every now and then we have to have some sort of substance. So we'll go for it. Jennifer, first of all, tell us about yourself. Like I said, no sound bites. We can talk like human beings. How did you get into law, and more specifically, how did you get into the world of mixed martial arts and the law, which you're currently you're working in the gray area that exists right now? How'd that all get going?
Well, a long, strange history. My background was originally in music, if you can believe it, and I decided that I didn't want to pursue a career in performing arts, so I went to law school. And what drew me to law school was that I had been involved with a women's organization, actually, that did rape crisis work and violence against women work. And I thought originally I would go to law school and become a prosecutor or something of that nature, and definitely go into the public interest. And I did go to law school, and it just so happened, though, that I ended up sort of identifying more with the underdog, and I ended up being more drawn to defense work. And so that's how I sort of ended up in criminal defense work, which is a little strange, coming from a victim's rights advocacy. And I loved it, and I worked for a public defender's office in Chicago for about 5 years. I was weaned on appellate work there, and appellate work is kind of like cerebral stuff. It's a lot of reading records and then analyzing them in case law and writing. So I've always been a really strong writer, and did very well in my contract course in law school. So I'm good with the written word, and it's also an area of the law where you do have to have a performance aspect when you're in court. So it all kind of came together.
Yeah.
And that was, that's sort of how I got into the law generally. But I was in Chicago at this time, and then I moved. I actually have a master's degree in music, if you can believe it, a bachelor and master's degree in music.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask, you mentioned you started off wanting to get into music. I was going to ask, were you a singer or an instrument player?
It's just crazy. I was an opera singer. I know
Oh my God.
everyone's shocked by that, but yes, I was an opera singer, and I went to school in New York. So that was my first introduction to New York, was in my master's program, and I really loved New York. Always have loved New York, but I went back home. I'm from the Midwest, originally from Indiana. And I went back to Chicago to pursue law school. And then, fast forward to, 2004 and 3 babies later, and the law degree, we decided to move our family back to New York. And that's when we moved back. I had 3 kids at the time, ended up having a 4th.
Wow.
So I was pretty busy. But I was still pursuing law, and I ended up starting my own law practice there in 2007.
Wow.
So I've been in private practice since then.
You had 4 kids. I'm sorry, you had 4 kids, and you started your own law firm. Is that how?
Yeah, I
How?
was very busy.
Oh my God.
I'm a testament to not practicing safe sex or something, because I don't know what happened, but I ended up with 4 kids. It was not my intent, but it's what happened.
I hear you.
And it's actually my son that got me into MMA originally, and that's I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, when he was about, I guess he was 5. He had been diagnosed with ADHD, like a lot of boys are. And he's a great kid, but he was, a little distractible, a little maybe hyper, I guess. And if you don't know what ADHD is, it's the newfangled term for like ADD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. Every kid in like Manhattan is diagnosed with something, but so. In addition to school services, someone told us that you should get him involved in mixed martial arts. It's really a great way to focus that energy if you're a physical kid.
Yeah.
And that just spurred an interest that, I can't completely explain. But it was, it opened my eyes to a world that I really enjoyed and knew I would want to be a part of in some ways.
Yeah. Okay, so tonight, basically, we want to kind of put the highlight on MMA being legalized in New York, but I still have to ask. So you are an MMA fan, is that correct?
Absolutely. I'm a huge MMA fan, and I have been for quite some time. My son Sensei was on Team Sonnen on The Ultimate Fighter. Uriah Hall, and that's how I met Uriah.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, that's the connection there. Uriah was my son's sensei, and he was so great with kids.
Oh, wow.
And, I loved watching just the classes, but then I started watching the fights and studying them with my son, and my ex is now an ex-husband, but that's a whole other story. But he was always like, interested, but he didn't have the same passion for it, and I just really I'm not a big sports person even, but that sport just really resonated with me on so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am a huge fan.
Yeah, it's like more than a sport. I mean, like, when you break it down, it is like human fighting. That's like a whole nother like level. Like before we even invented sports, fighting was there. So is it a sport? I've always I've always asked myself that, but no, hold on. So your son trained under Uriah Hall. Uriah Hall was his sensei. Okay,
right.
So when you were watching Uriah Hall on the last season of The Ultimate Fighter, just run people over, put them in, almost, it looked like Adam Sella was dead.
Right.
We actually confirmed that he was alive. We interviewed him 2 weeks ago, so he's still alive. But I mean,
did you really?
yeah. And we actually interviewed Uriah too. But very, very, they're both cool guys to talk to. But when you were watching Uriah Hall go through these people on The Ultimate Fighter, And were you at least a little concerned that maybe your son his sensei was like some sort of psychopathic killing machine?
No, I know Uriah so well. I mean, he basically has crashed at my house. He's eaten cereal and eaten my food, and I have these fond memories of him, just kind of an omnipresent person in my house, playing video games with my son. So no, I see this entirely different side of him, which is so sweet, like a big, big child.
Yeah.
And he really, and I'm not, overstating this, was and is amazing sensei with kids. Like, he has this, because I think he is a big kid in some ways. So, but seeing him in that format and that forum was interesting to me because, I never thought of him as the wrecking machine that he is, obviously. I've seen him fight before. I saw him fight in Ring of Combat, and but I think there was something about that environment and something about the coaching of Chael Sonnen that really brought something wonderful and special out in his fighting that I had never seen, and I don't think anybody had seen.
Yeah, I didn't know that he actually did any coaching. Interesting, definitely. Now, related to that, I believe you and Uriah Hall. Well, I'll just ask. I was going to do my homework and research it, but then I thought I'd rather just have you tell me and the listening audience. House of Arc. What is it, and what's going on there?
Well, it's a new business that I have actually been wanting to do something with MMA for quite some time, and I wasn't exactly sure how or what. And so I was with Uriah when we were in Albany, a few months back, and they had asked Uriah to come do some lobbying and talk to the lawmakers there about legalization and try to dispel some of the myths and stereotypes associated with MMA to the legislators. And I sort of jumped in at one point because there was a women's group there, and I do consider myself a feminist. I've been very involved in women's groups for a very long time. I know what the concerns are because I share the concerns, and I felt that I had to come to the rescue or come to at least the defense of MMA in a couple instances with these women's groups. And so that was sort of interesting, and I got involved a little bit on that side. I was asked to lead a press conference a couple weeks ago with down in Albany and address some of the attitudes from women's groups and women's concerns about MMA legalization, having some correlation to violence against women, which it does not. So that's one piece of it. And then I started helping people like Uriah and other people, Cody McKenzie, and with some legal issues related to contracts and a number of ways. And what I found is there's a real need out there for people fighters to have good counsel and counsel that puts their needs first. And if they're too busy training and not necessarily to tie them into management contracts and try to keep them, like property, but just, provide a service and also to help on the management side if that's what they want. But, again, I'm a real believer in, not tying people up. So House of Arc is a management company, but it's more than that. It has a business model, or will have a business model that's designed more sort of like, you eat what you kill. If you want to work with me, and I can offer you something, whether it's just legal representation, I'm flexible, and I really would also like to have a niche sort of division for women, because I feel like there's really a need out there, and there's going to be a whole new world of sponsorship opportunities for women as more women get involved in professional MMA and are fighting professionally.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, MMA is a new sport, basically, there are these fighters, that all they've been doing is training and fighting. So yes, most of them are in the dark. You use the term I use the term naive. I mean, they're naive young fighters. They don't know what's going to come. I mean, for example, Uriah Hall, over the past couple months, he just went from, just a nobody to one of the biggest names, prospects in the UFC. So undoubtedly the vultures are coming out of the woodwork. I'm sure it happens with every single fighter now. And so it's good so basically House of Arc is basically you're going to be either management or offering legal counsel to fighters.
Right.
Okay. Just to get a
I mean, with Uriah as an example, Uriah is technically self-managed at this point. I mean, he has had opportunities he's met with lots of managers, and he's had a prior experience that was really left a sour taste in his mouth with his prior fight camp. And so right now, he's not inclined to commit to a management group, which I think is totally understandable. He should be focusing on his fights. He should be focusing on winning his fight in August. He doesn't need to be thinking about that if he can help it. The problem is, of course, is that people need sponsorships and they need to be able to feed themselves. So they end up signing on, to contracts that sometimes lock you in to a term out of desperation, and you may not be getting what you think you're getting. So, I believe the better way to approach these things is if I can hook up fighters with sponsorship opportunities and be able to say, listen, I have this opportunity. I think this is a great fit. Are you interested? Yes, I'm interested. No, I'm not interested. Whatever. Then you make it happen. You make deals happen without necessarily having a stable of fighters that you basically control. Right. And that's, I think, a more entrepreneurial way of doing things. I think it's a fairer way of doing things. And, and in the end, the bottom line is if you're doing good work for people, and I have found this as a lawyer, because you can always fire your lawyer, but if you're doing great work for people, they come back. I mean, that's the bottom line. You don't have to worry about those types of contracts that tie people down or limit people. And if he finds an opportunity somewhere else and somebody else comes to him, God bless him. He should be able to take advantage of that opportunity without giving up a portion of it to someone who hasn't earned it. And that's, I know a lot of managers out there probably would like my way of doing things, but I just think it's the way to do it, and I think it's the way of the future. And it gives the fighters more independence and more freedom to pursue sponsorship opportunities and ways to feed themselves, and also focus on their fight.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely a new field that's opening there, and every day we see every week there's a new legal issue that we never even thought would come into play with MMA, whether it be the transgender fighters or the TRT or this crap about the social security number.
Yes, well, that's interesting. I read about that today, and I'm not surprised, but it's concerning because a lot of people. You can't get a driver's license anymore without a social security card. But in New York, as an example, I don't even think Uriah has a driver's license. Nobody in New York has driver's licenses. So you might know your social security number, but you may not have a card, or you may not even have a social security number. But this has changed. I mean, I read that this was part of the legislation from the very beginning. Foreign fighters had to provide certain documentation, but I think it's being enforced in large part because of the Boston Marathon massacre situation. Really super cautious, but it's just a problem that they should be able to resolve without precluding fighters.
Yeah, anytime I hear about something. Yeah, anytime I hear about something like this, it's these people are coming in to fight. It's obviously it's the bureaucrats, but at the end of the day, I always suspect that money is at the root of every single like snafu that comes up. I mean, it's just another tax
Follow
that
the
we're
money.
talking about. Yeah, it's just got to be another way of taxing people, I'm sure. But let's
Well, certainly with the legalization of MMA, that's the case.
exactly.
In New York.
Yeah, let's actually get to that. MMA legalization in New York. Now, for anybody listening, the casual fan listening, Jennifer, talk to me like I'm 12 years old. Why hasn't MMA been legalized in the state of New York?
Well, first, let me point out that it is the only state in the country where it isn't legalized, and I think a lot of people know that, but if you don't, there it is. Last state standing. And in terms of procedure, the Senate of the General Assembly in New York passed a bill that would legalize it. So the state senators voted to pass a bill that would legalize it. It has to get through the House, okay, which is the General Assembly. And the Speaker of the House is a fellow by the name of Sheldon Silver. He has an awful lot of power. He's been around for a very, very long time. And he has so much power that he can actually prevent the bill from being voted on in a legislative session. Okay? So the bill passed the Senate. It's standing there ready to be voted on, but he claims that it doesn't have the support of Democrats to pass. Therefore, he's not going to bring it to a vote. And then it sort of dies. And when they say a bill dies in the Senate, what they mean is it didn't follow through the whole process.
Yep.
So again, you have to think, well, wow, is there some motivation on the part of Sheldon Silver? And, without trying to get too political or too opinionated about it, I think it's fair to say that there's something at work here. There's something at play, and there are theories out there, but and I think they're valid theories that he is sort of abusing his power by refusing to let the process play through and see, because, he claims it doesn't have the support, but I don't know that that's true. I mean, I know by, the lobbying efforts of UFC feel pretty strongly that the bill does have the support to pass, and that's my sense. And we know New Yorkers want it, which is really what lawmakers should be concerned about. The New Yorkers are in favor of it. They want it. It has economic benefits for the state, which are obvious, not only for like Madison Square Garden, but more importantly for some of the areas of New York that are less financially,
Yeah, we're talking.
Wow.
We're talking new.
Buffalo.
They can tax the UFC. They can bring in tourism, the restaurants and hotels will see a boom.
Any like Buffalo, you can bring in 20,000 people for a fight in Buffalo or Rochester, where John Jones is from, and and also it's so close to Canada. You can bring in GSP, and people from Canada will come over into Buffalo, or you can fill up a small town that would really benefit from the economics of it. 20,000 people in one weekend. I mean, think what that does for the restaurants and for the hotels and for the really any number of opportunities to be had there. So
yeah,
and what's interesting is when you listen to the lawmakers talk about it, they don't make sense. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. They say they're concerned about the health risks. They want studies. It's not logical. And as a lawyer, when I hear people defending some action that just isn't logical, I'm with you. You got to think, okay, where's the cronyism or the that's it.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. One of the talking points being used by the the people against MMA in New York, Lorenzo Fertitta actually issued a statement earlier today about this. One of the talking points, the reasons that they're trying to keep it illegal in New York, they're claiming, of course, that it's a dangerous sport, but they're also claiming that it's misogynistic. And so you mentioned that you actually worked for rape crisis, for representing women in rape crisis, that sort of field. So how do you address that? I mean, obviously real talk, that's a bullshit excuse. So,
it's an unbelievably bullshit excuse. And when I hear misogyny, I'm the first one to point it out. And this is what I say about that. First of all, I think Sheldon Silver has a lot of nerve to be talking about what's misogynistic. I mean, there's a big scandal in New York. He has the possibility of losing his position because he basically covered up for a fellow assemblyman who was sexually harassing his staffers, a fellow by the name of Victor Lopez. And so, I want to say to the lawmakers, worry about yourselves, okay? How about, stop sexually harassing the young staffers in your offices, which is far more concerning to me than you being concerned about what some one idiot in the UFC makes a crass or crude comment about women. And that's, listen, there's sexism everywhere. The UFC is no exception, but neither is it a club of rapists either. It is, you have people who say dumb things in the NFL, any sport. Even lawmakers say dumb things. I mean, we see all the time our congressmen saying incredibly sexist things. What does that say? It says that the guy's an idiot, and maybe he has some antiquated views about women. But how it reflects on the sport as a whole is absurd. I have the exact opposite view. I don't think it's not only misogynistic. It's not misogynistic. I think it's very empowering for women because, and I have to give it to the UFC and Dana White for ultimately making that decision to permit professional women fighters to fight in the UFC. I think that says so much more about the view of women by the UFC and by MMA. People just love MMA regardless of the organization than anything.
Yep.
So
and it just exposes
I'm really offended by that particular excuse that it's misogynistic.
Yeah, and it just exposes we have women in the UFC now, so what the hell are they talking about? Obviously, I mean, when Dana White talks about it, and Lorenzo actually, they bring up over and over again that behind it all, when you get to the root of it, is the culinary union in Vegas.
Yeah.
I think
they're right.
Yeah, I believe it too. But that's confusing to me because obviously, I mean, I have I got to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
So would MMA and the UFC being in New York, would that hurt the culinary union business? I mean, is that going to hurt people? What are they afraid of losing? It can't solely be a personal grudge,
I really don't. I don't even think it's about whether. I mean, I guess one position to take is that the only sort of venue that competes with the Vegas venues is Madison Square Garden. I guess that's one aspect of it. But I don't even think that's the real issue. There's always going to be fights in Vegas, plenty of fights. I think the issue is a vendetta or a vindictiveness against the Fertitta brothers because of their non-union labor stance with respect to their casinos, and that they're trying to pressure the Fertitta brothers to change that stance. And because Democrats in New York are aligned with unions generally, and I'm sure there's being money thrown, somehow being thrown to New York by the unions. If you look at the tweets of the culinary union talking about how MMA is so, against women, it promotes violence against women. I'm like, why is the culinary union? What if they have any? Why do they think can even discuss this issue? What do you know about it? It's very strange. You have to ask yourself. Well, they really were lobbying on behalf of the women's groups in New York about whether or not it promotes violence against women. It's preposterous. And the problem is you listen to these lawmakers talk about MMA, and they sound like idiots. I'm sorry. They sound like complete idiots, like they've never actually watched about. They have no idea what they're talking about.
It's like when they try to talk about the internet. It's the same story. They have no clue.
ignorance. Oh, it's cage fighting. And it's called ultimate fighting because there are no rules. That's why it's called ultimate fighting, and it's not regulated, and it's not refereed, and it's just perpetuating lies, which is troubling. I mean, think about it this way. If they do that with issues like this, MMA, it's a sport. Arguably, it's not, life-threatening or anything. Imagine what they do with other issues that really affect all of our lives in some really significant ways, whether it's taxes or Social Security or Medicaid. I mean, they are willing to warp and twist the truth and to their benefit, and it's so troubling to hear it. I can only imagine that it drives the Fertitta brothers and Dana White up the wall to hear this sport that they've been so instrumental in promoting and doing wonderful things, by regulating it, making it safer, and allowing and inviting women into it, to hear these stupid lawmakers describe it like it's bare-knuckle fighting from, 30, 40 years ago.
Yep, and it is outrageous that it is the year 2013, and we still see, this is blatantly, if you take 1 second to even look at this, you see it doesn't have anything to do with women it has nothing to do with misogyny, it has nothing to do with fighter safety. It's all coming down to just these elite millionaires who are just they are willing to engage in it's the reason why nothing ever gets done in Congress. Congress has the lowest approval rating of all time. Nothing ever gets done. Now we see this here. It's the UFC versus a few people with power in New York and with these unions. It's just amazing to me that they will continue to do this to the detriment of their own constituencies.
Well, right, that's really the most troubling part is that I hear these lawmakers and even the women lawmakers who have discussed the issue, and they're not even educating themselves to make a decision that's based in logic. They don't even care to fake it for us. They have to perpetuate myths. And when you look at it, the bottom line is this: in terms of injuries, MMA is. I said this during the press conference. I have an oldest daughter who's a gymnast, and I have another daughter who is an ice skater. Both inherently dangerous sports. And then I have a son who wrestles and who also fights MMA. I am on the end of my seat worrying about my daughter flying over a vault, running as fast as she can. Injuries from that, much more than I am about my son fighting MMA. That's not even talking about sports like boxing, which is legal in New York, and hockey and traditional sport of football, of course. When you compare head injuries and that type of injury from athletes in those traditional sports to athletes in MMA, there's just no doubt that, MMA looks like ballet. I mean, by comparison. I mean, in a boxing match, you go 12 rounds, you can be knocked down. You can get up as many times as you can get yourself up in 10 seconds. And, you have MMA where you're down, you're out, over. And then the medical rules that have been implemented by the UFC are very stringent. And these are sort of facts that are being glossed over. And New Yorkers are really getting screwed in the end because of it.
It's just sad to see that such blatant. I mean, obviously, you take a look at it. It boils down to corruption. There is corruption at the highest levels of government in the state of New York. And, this is one case where obviously it exists everywhere in every political system. But this is clear-cut corruption right in front of us. Unions hanging out. It's costing New York money. Well, not costing them, but they're losing money that they would be otherwise making. It's just
UFC 159. I mean, it generated I don't know how much money, but they said $2 million or something of that nature. I mean, that was right over the river, and that cost New York real dollars. And the women's groups that are even coming out, they're being used as pawns. And this is another point that I want to make, is that I am concerned about issues of violence against women. I have daughters. I'm a woman myself. I'm very concerned about them. It's not an issue I take lightly. I worked in women's crisis. I worked in a rape crisis center both in New York and in Chicago, and I take these issues seriously. And by women's groups and women legislators who say they care about these issues to put their resources and time into trying to prevent legalization of MMA in the name of preventing violence against women is a fraud, and it minimizes the importance of the issue. There are things that we can be doing to minimize violence against women, and this is not where the energy should be spent. And in fact, perhaps encouraging more women to be able to defend themselves and learn MMA would be a better way to, if you really cared about the issue.
Yep. And
one way to do that is by allowing little girls, to be able to look up to professional MMA fighters that are girls. That's one way to do it. I think a far more effective way, and they're doing the exact opposite. And you're right, it comes back down to graft and corruption. Because Sheldon Silver, used $100,000 of public money to pay off women who accused his crony of sexual harassment. Now the women's groups and the women legislators are mad at him, so he's basically, trying to placate them. And, that's the backstory that no one hears.
And there you have it for anybody listening. She is an advocate, a legal advocate for women's rights. She has represented abused women, just women in general. And she's telling you right now, the whole MMA misogynistic angle, it ain't flying. It is total BS and corruption. Now, Jennifer, I just have one more question about the New York MMA legalization thing before I hand it to Jake. He has a couple questions, and then we'll wrap it up with some ridiculous legal MMA questions. The fun part.
Okay.
So, the last question. I mean, what can the fans realistically do to help get MMA legalized in New York? I mean, is there anything at this point? I mean, if we scream and yell and just shout out the Sheldon Silvers, the culinary unions of the world, would that even help? I mean, is there anything the casual MMA fan can really do to help out?
It's hard because the legislative session is almost over and Sheldon Silver hasn't brought it to a vote. But I do think that certainly constituents of New York can write their assemblymen and complain that, listen, we want this. It has economic benefits to our state. Quit using your own political problems and political agenda to suppress our desires and our needs here in this state. I mean, I think, the more complaints and the more the media gets involved, I think that's really the question. I thought it was useful that Shaquille O'Neal weighed in because, it just brings more media attention to the issue. So, yes, celebrities weighing in on the issue, I think, is helpful because, it does raise awareness. But, the average person, writing their assembly person, you'd like to think that it resonates, it has some bearing on the issue, but unfortunately, I don't know, I've become pretty jaded myself about all that.
Yeah, you got to slip $100 bill in that envelope to even get it read at this point. It
really feels that way, doesn't it?
It's damn sad. Jake from the MMA podcast, you're on with Jennifer Bonjean. Got
Thanks
anything?
again.
What's up?
Yeah. Thank you again for coming on. I really think now that New York really is the last bastion in North America to not legalize MMA. I think that's going to add a tremendous amount of pressure. But you kind of answered the first part of the question just now as far as are you optimistic that MMA will pass in New York soon? But if you had to put a date on it, whether it be 2014, whether it be 2020, when do you think we'll finally be able to see mixed martial arts in the state of New York?
Well, I'm not optimistic for this legislative session because everything I hear is that Sheldon Silver is not going to put it on the agenda. And he claims that it's, doesn't have the votes, which I think is baloney. Whether they will raise it again next year, in the next legislative session, I don't know. I think the last time it came up was 2 years ago. So I think, and if I'd like to say that there's still some hope out there that it passes this session, but I think it's more likely a year or two from now, unfortunately.
Yeah, so, Dana White, the UFC president, he's been going off about this, especially recently. He is one of the more outspoken guys, not just in mixed martial arts, but in sports, period. How much can he really do? How much of a pull, if he yells and screams and talks about it day in and day out, like in a reality, how much of a effect can Zuffa have on this entire process? Because Zuffa's pushing it really, really hard.
No, they have, and they've invested a lot of money. I mean, I think something I read in the range of $1.5 million in lobbying efforts, and they're doing the right things, but they're just, you realize they're up against a really powerful organization. I mean, Governor Cuomo was is on the record. I wouldn't say overly joyous about it, but certainly supporting it and wanting to get it through because he understands that New Yorkers want it. So I don't know. I mean, they put a lot in it thus far, and to no avail. It just shows you. I mean, Sheldon Silver needs to go. For more than one reason. What's ironic is he needs to go because of the sexual harassment issue that he's got his hands in, that he protected a colleague of his, used public funds to pay off women who had been sexually harassed, and then comes out and says, well, yeah, I guess I didn't handle that so well. So, it's to me just an insulting and an ironic situation where he actually is using this issue as leverage with women's groups because his buddy was sexually harassing women. Talk about, adding insult to injury.
And I have never, I watch the news every day, and guess how many times I've seen this Sheldon Silver issue come up. I have never seen it. This is the first time hearing about it, Jennifer.
And if you are a citizen of the state of New York, even if you aren't, pretend you are. This Sheldon Silver guy, he's the Speaker of the New York State Assembly. Write to any politician you want and just tell him you want him out. He's been in office since 1994. That's 20 years. That's long enough.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially for...
Listen, people abuse power when they have it too long and unchecked. And he's King Silver.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
so,
really crazy.
There's an opportunity here as far as people that want to get involved too. I mean, I believe really the power of a lot of this stuff it always comes back to the people, and somebody taking up the cause in regards to Twitter, opening up a Facebook fan page with remove Sheldon Silver. I mean, those are the type of things that we talk about raising awareness on a lot of issues, but when it only takes one person picking up the cause and everybody else jump on board, and the more pressure that you can put on guys like this, the better. This is the first I've heard of this guy's name myself, so this type of stuff is always good. And for everybody that's listening to this, I hope you guys retweet this out on Twitter. Send it to your friends. Let's get it on your Facebook pages. It'll be us, the people that involved in the sports, the fans, and everything that will get this thing.
I think that's right.
Get the thing passed. Yeah.
Yeah, just to sort of wrap.
Happening in Brazil.
Yeah, right. Jesus Christ.
Obviously it's a different issue, but listen, what the people can accomplish, and the effect it has. So it's seeing it in action.
Yeah, I'll sort of get off the topic of the state of New York, because it really sounds like, there are just not a lot of positive things to talk about. It's been run with a three men in a room corrupt system for decades, and I hope in the next decade or two we can start taking steps to remedy it. But I sort of want to move past the serious stuff, move to the semi-serious stuff. We had friend of the show, Keto Andrews, on 4 or 5 weeks ago, and he talked about a 2 versus 2 fight he fought on at an Indian reservation, which is wild that in New York
it was
you can't.
It was actually.
Yeah, that was Terrell. That was Terrell.
Oh.
That was Kate. Kelvin's coach, Terrell. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that, but I know these Indian reservations aren't required to operate under the state athletic commissions, but is there a limit to the crazy fights that they can put on, or can they literally do anything they want?
Well, I mean, that I hadn't heard that. That's really incredible. I mean, yes, there's obviously limits to. I assume that they're regulated by something, but maybe not. That's insane. But they still have to make sure that they're not. I mean, there are liabilities that can occur when you're that reckless, and you would think that would be an incentive to make sure it's safe on some level. And you certainly can't be having criminal acts take place. And I don't know that would count, but. I think it underscores just how competent the UFC has been and what a good job they have done in legitimizing the sport and bringing it to a level that obviously it hasn't been, and it's going to go play. It's the biggest growing sport out there, period. And, I'm excited to see where it goes. I think we're just in the beginning of it, and it's an international sport. So that's kind of crazy. But, yeah, I think, there's a lot of crazy things that go on that lawmakers should be spending their time focusing in on rather than, professional MMA, which is highly regulated.
Yeah, sorry about that. My memory was slipping. It was not Keto Andrews. It was Terrell Hunsinger from Yuma United, who we had on May 16th. If you want to go back and listen to that interview. Final question before I pass it to Ramses. Thanks again for coming on. I come from a family of lawyers. My uncle actually represented Terry Schiavo's husband here in Tampa Bay back when all that was going on.
Gosh, really? Is that right?
Yeah. As far as cases you can talk about, what is the craziest case you've ever been involved with?
Wow, that's a good question. I've been in some amazing cases. So I'll tell you about my case that I just literally had a hearing on Monday. I represent a lot of people who have been wrongly convicted at the hands of corrupt police departments. And as you can see from my views about corrupt lawmakers, they extend to corrupt police officers as well. I also do civil rights work where I sue police departments that have broken laws and have violated people's constitutional rights. And I have a client that I represent currently that's been incarcerated for 20 years wrongfully. We're having a hearing as we speak. It's ongoing on his actual innocence. And he was convicted based on the testimony of a snitch, a rat, someone who claimed to have heard him proceeding, and he did so. The rat did it at the direction of a corrupt police officer who has done this in so many cases. His name's Ronaldo Guevara. I'm going to get the name out there. The guy he's ruined people's lives. He's a psychopath. And I had him on the stand on Monday, and he pled the Fifth Amendment to all my questions, which to anybody who doesn't understand what that means, it's a very good thing. So when I accused him of framing my client, he said, I pled the Fifth. I choose not to respond. And what that's saying is on the grounds that I might incriminate myself. And it's basically suggesting that his testimony would perhaps get him into some trouble. So it was a wonderful day in court. There's been some press on it out of Chicago Sun-Times. And so 20 years in prison. And I have other cases involving the same corrupt police officer. So those cases are really true. That's like the work that I love to do. I have a lot of crazy stories about crazy stuff people have done. But that's the work I love. And I think that's one of the things that does draw me to MMA. I'm like just always a champion of the underdog. I'm personally privileged in my life, but I really identify with people. And I think the sport brings a lot of people with great stories about what they've overcome, a lot of Cinderella stories, and I'm really drawn to that human aspect of it.
For sure. Just a quick follow-up before I give it back to Ramses. I actually lived in Chicago last year, and obviously the state of New York has a lot of corrupt issues from MMA. Chicago's known as the Windy City because of corrupt politics. If you had to say one was more corrupt, is it New York or Chicago?
Well, I think Chicago, they're corrupt differently. I think Chicago is more corrupt overall. I think Chicago has a lot of issues related to racism still. It has their machine politics system is still very well intact. Albany has corruption, certainly, but Chicago is kind of on its own level, and its police department is the most corrupt police department, as far as I'm concerned, in this country. And their state's attorney's office, their prosecuting office, which it's just a corrupt criminal justice system that results in travesties of justice day in and day out, and it's so alarming. I mean, it's a scary place in some ways, but it's a different type of politics because a different type of corruption. I don't think that Albany's motivated necessarily by race and those types of things, but it's money. So corruption anywhere is bad, and when you're in the business of having to compare it, it's kind of unfortunate.
True. Well, that does it for all the questions I've got. Thank you again for coming on, and I hope Josh Rosenthal looks you up because he needs a good lawyer right about now. Ramses, it's all you.
Okay.
Thanks, Jake. Before I ask my last ridiculous legal questions, just because, I'll tell you right now, Jennifer, sometimes I like to smoke a little pot and think up ridiculous questions to ask a lawyer. I've done it before. Sure. I love it. But I just want to make sure that Coach Jamie, the living legend, who is still here, I just want to make sure that he didn't have anything to follow up with or ask you before we wrap this up. Coach, are you there?
No, I'm here. No, absolutely. I'm looking forward. Me and Jen are actually flying down to the Bay Area this weekend, and we're gonna hang out and talk some business. I'm excited about that.
We're gonna spend time with our friend Amber, whose birthday it is.
You beat me to it. Yeah.
Well, wait, what's going on here?
I was just setting that up.
Oh, no.
For you. We have a mutual friend, a friend of the show that actually booked our Marina chauffeur interview last weekend.
Yes.
Amber Matthews, follow her on Twitter at Amber L. Matthews with 2 T's. It is her birthday right now, as of midnight over where she's at.
Yeah,
so happy birthday to her. Yeah. And
happy birthday, Amber. Can't wait.
Yeah. So I definitely got to get that in. But no, definitely looking forward to spending some time with Jen, and I'm really excited about her House of Arc. I work with a guy, Andy, www.thesearchdoctors. He does a lot of internet marketing, Google Ads, SEO, SEM, SAP. Builds websites, and we've been contracted to build the House of Arc website, www.houseofarc, ARC, in process. If you Google it, it'll come up and it'll say coming soon. We got that up, and we're building it now. So I'm definitely, there's some big things on the way.
House of Arc.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're excited to talk about it, and we have some great ideas, and I look forward to sharing more opportunities for fighters out there. And really, our tagline is "Fighters First," because that's the idea, to make sure that their needs are being met first, and not just a bunch of, like you said earlier, wealthy people who I want to take advantage of naivete or people who are just not well versed in other areas.
The vultures that got Mike Tyson. Those people, they're still around.
Exactly.
They have more.
Well,
resources.
in the business model of, you basically you eat what you kill in a sense. I mean, there's a lot of managers that can make a lot of promises, but if you're forced to work specifically each time for the fighter you're working for, I mean, it just makes sense to me. I mean, there's been some opportunities out there as far as some guys that I've talked about doing sports management with, and it just, the thing is, when you really work hard in this business and you develop a relationship, you don't want to just vouch for anybody because you kind of put your reputation on the line when you do that. Yeah. And I'm excited about this business model that Jen's talking about, because really it's a two-way street in regards to, if one doesn't like what the other one's doing, you're not stuck. And I've seen that happen with fighters and managers where there's an adversarial relationship and there's nothing you can do about it until you get a certain. I mean, you look at the Bellator situation. I mean, how many guys have been completely just screwed over? Yeah. And I hope something changes with Viacom, but I mean that's the problem is these guys get stuck in these contracts and they get shelved and they just sit there and there's nothing they can do about it. So
so it's like an open door policy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Rather it be, and that's one of the things I love about, I'm managing, Lightning Liz McCarthy. I'm a coach and I'm managing her. One of the things I love about Invicta is she has a, contract with Invicta. We're trying to get on that next card, but, it's an open contract where as long as I call Janet or Shannon and I have a conversation, hey, we got an opportunity. I know we're not on the next Invicta card, but we've got this fight. They're willing to work with people. Yep. So that type of relationship,
flexible.
I think, yep. Absolutely. Yeah. It's good for everybody.
A good faith contract used to be the norm. Now it's an oddity. That's a sad state of affairs. Definitely.
Very much so.
But yes, Jennifer, are you ready for my ridiculous ending questions to wrap this up for you? Okay. Yes. Now you you went through all the trouble to go through school and get your degrees in law school and study this and that. The bar exam, you had to pass that. All just to bring you here to this point where you have to answer my stupid questions. So congratulations.
This is the highlight of my day. What are you talking about?
I hope so. And yeah, just for a little programming note, most people, for Jennifer's time, she's a lawyer. This would cost you by the minute. She's doing this out of the goodness of her heart and the love of the sport. So thank you again, Jennifer.
We would owe thousands.
That's right. Yeah.
My pleasure.
And I was trying to keep this short. I'm trying to get better at this, people. But when you get going with somebody interesting, it's real talk. That's the word on the street. Okay, so Jennifer, some of your best known cases, they involve reversing and appealing false convictions. Like I've seen enough movies. We've all seen the prison movies or whatever. According to the movies, like the cliche is that everybody in there is innocent, right? So how do you know when you've got a valid appeal or a case of corruption on your hands? Like, how are you able to tell the difference?
Well, I have a pretty well-honed bullshit barometer, I will say that. But, listen, the evidence speaks for itself usually. And I have found that the cases where someone is actually innocent or factually innocent, not just like, okay, they didn't have enough evidence to prove him, but someone who's been wrongly convicted, factually innocent, I find that you see in the evidence real problems. It speaks for itself. I will also tell you another little trick. I have found that, and it's not a question I ask when I represent someone initially, are you innocent or are you guilty? It's my job to represent people, and it's not my job to I can't defraud the court certainly, but I'm not, I have to do my best job to interview somebody without putting on false testimony. Mm-hmm. But people who are actually innocent, factually innocent, they're screaming and talking about their innocence all the time. I'm innocent. They talk about it in terms of being wrongfully convicted. Whereas people who know, like, maybe I got screwed over, but I'm really not that innocent. They're not. I have found my clients are like, they're pretty honest people, most of them. They're kind of like, yeah, do the best you can for me. But, they're not going to lie to my face and say they're innocent when they're not. That's usually the rule. And I still do my best job to represent them because that's my job. But I've never found it particularly difficult to be like, I wonder if this one's legit or not legit. I just really feel like, when I look at the evidence and when I talk to my clients, and I know it, and then I work my ass off to prove it. And I've been pretty successful with these cases, and they're heartbreaking to me. But because you see how it's ruined families, and it ruins it for the victims too, because the victims think that the right person is in jail, and they're not. It's incredible work, very fulfilling, but very frustrating in a system that's designed to screw over people.
Yep, and of course, and the worst part, the guilty person is still out there, more than likely.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's a lot of people suffer.
Yeah, that's screwed up. Okay, MMA, or sorry, not MMA, sorry, lawyer movies. I'm stuck on the MMA thing because it's MMA podcast.
Movies.
Lawyer movies. Okay, I got to know. Shawshank Redemption, based on a short story written by Stephen King.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've seen the movie? Okay.
I have seen it, and it's one of people. This is a joke. It's like every guy I know, it's one of their favorite movies, and this is why I think like I'm somewhere like inside, like I don't know, like maybe in past life I was a dude or something. It's literally one of my favorite shows as well, or favorite movies, top 3 favorite movies, absolutely.
So I got to ask you then, Andy Dufresne, he gets wrongfully convicted, sentenced to life or whatever. So of course, throughout the whole movie, he's a smart guy. The law doesn't help him. He ends up tunneling out of there behind the poster of, I forget her name. Rita something Hayworth, I believe.
Bridget Bardot.
Yeah. So he tunnels his way out of that damn prison because the law ain't going to help him. Now, you as a lawyer, did you see that ending where you're like, yeah, man, get the hell out of there? Or in the back of your mind, are you thinking, damn it, I would have loved to have taken that case. He should have stayed in jail. He would be a millionaire. Like, what's your take on that?
It's a funny question, and no, I was pulling for him the whole time because the reality is I can't represent everybody, and I know most lawyers suck. I mean, even in my own field, I'm going to talk about my own colleagues. I think most lawyers, criminal defense attorneys, people in my field, I can't vouch for them. I mean, it's like managers, like Jamie was saying earlier, I can't vouch for, there's so few colleagues of mine that I can even recommend because I think so many of them are terrible. So I know what type of work I put in, I know what type of representation I provide, but I can't handle every case. I mean, I can barely scratch the surface, and I get tons of penitentiary mail. Heard about you from this guy, please take my case. And you're talking about poor people, too, that have no ability to hire attorneys. I take a lot of cases. Almost all my wrongful conviction cases I take pro bono. And meaning, these are indigent people. It's not rich people getting framed. So I was rooting for Andy. I'm a bit of, I have some vigilante tendencies. Like, sometimes you gotta take the law in your own hands. Not that I'm promoting that, but no,
I hear
you. Had to do what you had to do. I definitely liked that ending.
Damn good movie. Okay.
But if he had called me, I would have taken his case and I would have won it.
I bet you would have. I would bet money on that, definitely. Shout out to Andy Dufresne. Okay, so let's say, just for anybody out there listening, you're a lawyer. Let's say anybody out there gets arrested, pulled over, or just the cops show up for some reason or other. They say you're under arrest. They're not telling you why. You're just, anytime you're arrested, what is the best advice from a lawyer? Do you want to talk to the cops or no?
As a general rule, particularly in the more serious cases, I mean, I handle more serious felonies. I don't do a lot of, I don't do DUI work. I don't do small cases all that often. But I will give a little bit of advice about DUIs. But when it comes to more serious cases, the police are not your friends, unless you literally know the person. But they're there to try to get you to make admissions and make statements that incriminate you, and they're going to use against you.
They're
so,
there
it's
to
better
make
to
an
keep
arrest.
Quiet. Exactly. And so the best course of action is to say, I want to speak to my lawyer. And you can do it politely. You don't have to piss them off. You can say, listen, I want to cooperate, but I want my lawyer. I just want to be safe. I want my lawyer. And once you've asserted your right to a lawyer, what they're supposed to do is cease all interrogation, cease all questioning, and they're supposed to give you the opportunity to contact a lawyer or give you, they don't have to provide you with a lawyer at that time, but they say fine, and they're supposed to leave you alone. And again, that's done in a polite way.
Even when you think you're in the right, because what I always worry about is this. I live alone here in Austin, Texas, and it's Texas, so of course I'm protecting myself. I'm defended, but I've always wondered, let's say somebody does. The worst happens. He tries to break in and come into my place, and I of course I will shoot him dead. So then, and then I will call the police. But starting at that moment, when I dial 911, what should I do if I've just shot an intruder defending myself? As a lawyer, what is your advice?
Right. Well, that's a slightly different question. And if you have shot someone legitimately in self-defense, it's a complete justification to the crime. So you actually haven't committed any type of, you haven't broken any laws. Of course, at the same time, there's going to be a dead or injured person in your house, and, people are going to be scrutinizing your conduct. So you want to make sure that you have, handled it in the best way under the circumstances as possible. And when you call 911, I think would be important to say immediately what has happened, that you shot an intruder that had broken into your home, and, you need the police to come. And in those situations, you would talk to the police because, you haven't done, you haven't committed a crime that you needed to necessarily defend yourself against. So, that's a slightly different scenario. Where you're sort of at first blush look like you're an aggressor because you've shot somebody, but you definitely do want to be forthcoming and from the beginning, and sure you're consistent. People think you're lying when you're inconsistent.
Yeah, but anytime the cuffs come on, it's basically time to stop talking to them. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think any time that they've indicated that you are the subject of the investigation and you've done some type of crime, you want your lawyer. I mean, we're there for a reason. And you don't completely understand because you're not savvy enough with the system, hopefully, unless you're a career criminal, how the police will operate in investigating a case. You don't even know, whether something becomes important that you're admitting to or that looks suspicious, that isn't necessarily suspicious. It's really just better to have your attorney present, and at all times. And now, when it comes to DUIs, if you're drunk, don't blow. Don't blow the breathalyzer. Refuse.
Never.
You're still going to lose your license for 6 months, but you may not get a DUI. So
nice.
That's the criminal defense advice on that.
There you go. Refuse the tests, people.
Don't even do the field tests. If you can't pass them, don't try them if you know you're going to fail them. Is the point?
Yep.
Say, no, I want my lawyer.
Definitely. Yep.
You're still going to get your license suspended, but they still have to prove your DUI, which is a different issue.
Yep. And if you haven't memorized the ZYX, WVUT, etc., you need to do that tonight, people. Jennifer, last question. I've got to ask. I did my research here on the Word in the Street podcast a little bit here. I did see a clip of you on Fox News debating something that it's back in the news again because the trial is finally somewhat on. I'm talking about the George Zimmerman case, the Trayvon Martin shooting. For any of the listeners, George Zimmerman, you might have vaguely heard, he was basically he got into an altercation with someone who he deemed was suspicious walking around in his neighborhood. It ended up being a young black man named Trayvon Martin. I think he was a teenager, I believe. George Zimmerman ends up shooting him in what he's claiming is self-defense. Jennifer, what is real talk? If you're involved in any way, of course I understand, but real talk, what's your take on this case?
Well, listen, early on when he hadn't been arrested, I was very much, I was on the news, and I was very concerned that he had not been arrested under the facts that I had heard. It's TV. They don't always get it right, but based on the facts that I had heard, it sounded to me like there was probable cause to arrest him, and that they should have arrested him. It took them 44 days to arrest him, I believe, and that to me was a sign that there was some type of, something corruption in that particular police department, and I stand by that view. But I'm a criminal defense attorney, and now that he was arrested, the process is underway, and we're going to find out in court whether or not what the evidence shows. He claims he acted in self-defense. He's going to have to put on evidence that he acted in self-defense, and if he did legitimately act in self-defense, then of course it's a justification. But we don't know. They're still picking a jury, and the most important thing about trying a criminal case, in my opinion, is you got to get a fair jury, and it's very hard sometimes for defendants to do. And that's where they're at. I'll be interested to hear the evidence. I think there's a lot to suggest that he was a little trigger happy, but I'm not on the jury, and I'm going to keep an open mind until I hear what comes from the witness stand. Well, if a defense attorney can't do that, then nobody should be expected to do it.
Yeah, if you could, hate to press you, but if you could step outside of your own shoes, if you were just looking at it, and you had to you were in Vegas and you had to bet money. Is George Zimmerman going to be found guilty of any kind of charge of manslaughter or, I guess, murder?
I don't think it would be murder. I think it'll be a lesser, but I think he's going to be found guilty. I do, based on the evidence I've heard. Yeah,
I mean, his story. This is just me talking, people. His story that he's going to run with is that, and I may be wrong, but he's going to say that Trayvon Martin attacked him out of nowhere, and then there was like a ground and pound MMA style thing going on. George Zimmerman was getting his ass whooped, and then all of a sudden Trayvon Martin says, "I'm going to kill you." He sees the gun, starts reaching for it, and that's when George Zimmerman shoots him. That's the story that I believe that they're going to present in court, which sounds like exactly what you would say if you had to write the perfect story to get yourself out of trouble.
It doesn't pass the smell test to me. I hate to be, without being in the courtroom, it's hard for me to judge these things because I like to keep an open mind, but if I'm stepping out of my lawyer mode, there's just too much to suggest that, I'm not saying he didn't make a very terrible mistake, but I don't think it was self-defense.
Yeah, it sounds to me like, on Real Talk, it was just the case of two people with the wrong mindset colliding with each other at the wrong time.
Yep.
With preconceived notions about each other, and it just led to disaster. So.
Yep, and here we go. But yes, sorry, Jennifer. Thank you so much for coming on the show, educating us. Definitely, I can't thank you enough for your time. Every single minute of it.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I'd rather do this than Fox News any day of the week. Fox News, but this is fun.
We're not cutting you off to run Viagra commercials or ask who has mesothelioma. I just want to make sure that Jake or Coach Jamie Huey doesn't have anything else for you, or actually, it's time for the goodbyes, people. Let's say goodbye to our guest, Jennifer Bonjean. Look her up. Where can we actually contact you, Jennifer? Anybody that's out there?
I'm all over the place. Let's see.
You got a Twitter?
My law firm is I'm at Jennifer Bonjean on Twitter. At House of Arc is now up on Twitter, and of course Bonjean Law Group. My law firm is www.bonjeanlaw.com. And if you just Google my name, it's pretty easy to find. There aren't a ton of Jennifer Bonjeans out there. I guess it's fortunate nowadays.
There's only one in our book, though. And Coach Jamie, the living legend, who he was good enough to hook us up with you on this interview.
Well, he is a living legend. He was good enough to hook me up, so I appreciate it. It was a fun night.
Coach Huey, is she as cool as she seems on the line here?
Oh yeah,
we
had a good time hanging out in Newark, and we're gonna have an even better time hanging out this weekend. So yeah, Jennifer.
Listen, I work hard, but I play harder. But the only thing that beats my working is my playing.
There you go, people. Jennifer Bonjean.
Follow my vine, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I saw some of that yesterday. What? Wow! That
we were celebrating my big win in Chicago, so I was, celebrating usually involves alcohol with me.
Yeah,
so.
I was hoping it was a celebration, not just like a normal Monday. But yeah, those fine videos. Definitely check them out. But no, that beer looked delicious. The last one, the beer, it had, you could feel the hops rising out of it. I know my beers here in Austin, Texas, people. That is the word on the street. But yeah, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully you'll be back again sometime. And
I hope so. I hope MMA is legal in New York when I am, and I'm talking about all the great things we're doing in New York.
Oh yeah,
it'll happen. It'll happen. Appears to be dead in the water for now, but trust me, people, it will happen. These dinosaurs will die off eventually. Jennifer, thanks so much. We will let you go, and we'll keep in touch. Follow her at Jennifer Bonjean on Twitter. Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Mm-hmm.
See you.